Long before the skyscrapers of New York or the marble halls of London's financial district, there was a quieter, more shadowy world of wealth. It began in the dusty counting houses of Renaissance Italy, where men in velvet robes scribbled numbers on parchment under flickering candlelight. These were the first bankers, merchants of Florence and Venice, who realized that money could do more than buy goods. It could grow, multiply, and control. The Medici family, with their cunning minds and golden florins, were among the pioneers, lending to kings and popes alike. Their loans came with strings, interest rates that fattened their coffers and influence that bent the will of rulers. By the 15th century, they weren't just bankers, they were puppet masters, pulling levers behind thrones. Across the Alps, in the German city of Augsburg, another dynasty rose, the Fuggers. Jakob Fugger, known as the Rich, turned copper mines and silver veins into a fortune that dwarfed even the Medicis. He bankrolled the Habsburg emperors, funding wars and elections, ensuring that no crown sat on a head without his coin behind it. His ledgers held secrets, debts that could topple dynasties if called in. The banking elite learned early that power wasn't in castles or armies, but in the invisible threads of credit. They wove a web across Europe, connecting merchants, nobles, and clergy in a system that thrived on trust and trembled on betrayal. By the 1600s, the game shifted to Amsterdam, where the Dutch East India Company changed everything. It wasn't just a trading outfit, it was the world's first multinational corporation, backed by a new invention, the stock market. Shares were sold, fortunes were made, and the bankers watched as their wealth became a living thing traded on paper slips. The elite didn't just lend anymore, they owned pieces of empires. In London, a goldsmith named Thomas Gresham saw the future. He knew that people trusted his vaults more than their own homes, so he started issuing notes, promises of gold that became money themselves. These banknotes spread like wildfire, and soon the Bank of England was born in 1694, a fortress of finance backed by the crown. The secret elite had a new tool, a national bank that could print wealth at will. But the real masters stayed in the shadows. Families like the Rothschilds, who emerged from Frankfurt's cramped Jewish ghetto. Nathan Rothschild, with his hawk-like eyes, turned a modest inheritance into a banking empire that spanned continents. He funded Britain's war against Napoleon, smuggling gold across enemy lines in the dead of night. When the Battle of Waterloo ended, he knew the outcome before the king's messengers and made millions in a single day. The Rothschilds didn't just lend money, they shaped markets, governments, and wars. Their couriers raced across Europe, faster than any army, carrying news that tilted fortunes. Across the Atlantic, America was a wild frontier, but the bankers saw opportunity. Alexander Hamilton, the first Treasury Secretary, dreamed of a centralized bank to tame the chaos of a young nation. In 1791, the first Bank of the United States was born, modeled on Europe's giants. Yet it faced enemies, farmers and frontiersmen who feared the elite's grip tightening on their hard-won freedom. The bank died in 1811, but the elite didn't rest. A second bank rose, only to be struck down by Andrew Jackson, a president who raged against moneyed vipers in 1836. Still, the bankers adapted, burrowing into private firms and merchant houses. Men like J.P. Morgan emerged, a titan with a cigar-stained voice and a stare that could silence a room. Morgan didn't just lend, he controlled railroads, steel mills, and entire industries. When the US government faltered in 1895, he bailed it out, proving that the elite could outmuscle even a nation. By the 20th century, their power crystallized in a single moment, the secret meeting of 1910. On Jekyll Island, off Georgia's coast, a handful of bankers gathered under false names, plotting a new system. They birthed the Federal Reserve, America's central bank, in 1913, a creature of their design veiled as a public institution. It gave them the keys to the money supply, a power no king had ever held. Across the globe, their influence deepened as wars bled nations dry. World War I was a gold mine. Loans to Britain and France flowed from Wall Street, fattening the elite's vaults. The Treaty of Versailles in 1919 wasn't just a peace deal, it was a debt trap, engineered to keep countries paying for decades. The bankers thrived on chaos, turning ruin into revenue. Then came 1929 when the stock market crashed and millions lost everything. Whispers spread that the elite had pulled the strings, selling high before the fall. Whether true or not, they emerged stronger, buying up broken companies for pennies. The Great Depression was their harvest, a reaping of wealth from despair. In the shadows, they built a new order. International banks like the IMF and World Bank, born after World War II. These weren't just lenders. They were tools to bind nations in debt, ensuring the elite's dominance. Developing countries borrowed to survive, only to find the interest chaining them forever. The bankers called it aid, but it was controlled by another name. Back in America, Wall Street became their cathedral, a gleaming altar of glass and steel. Firms like Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley didn't just trade, they shaped policy, placing their men in Washington's halls. Presidents and senators bent to their will, deregulation opening floodgates of profit. The 2008 crisis was their masterpiece. Banks, too big to fail, were saved with public money, while homes emptied and lives crumbled. Yet the elite faced a new enemy, the digital age. Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin rose, promising freedom from their grip, a money they couldn't print or control. They fought back, buying into the tech, bending it to their will. Blockchain became their playground, another tool to wield. Today, the secret banking elite sit atop a world they've sculpted over centuries. Their names, Rothschild, Morgan, Rockefeller, echo in boardrooms and conspiracy theories alike. They've weathered revolutions, wars, and crashes, always emerging richer. Their power isn't in vaults of gold, but in the systems they've built, systems we live in, often without knowing. Look at your paycheck, your mortgage, your taxes. They're all threads in their web. The modern economy isn't an accident, it's their creation, a machine oiled with ambition and greed. But cracks are forming. People ask questions, dig into the past, demand change. The elite's secrecy, once their shield, now fuels suspicion. Will they adapt again, as they always have? Or will the digital tide wash their empire away? History whispers a warning. Underestimate them at your peril. For now they watch from penthouses and private jets, their hands on the levers of wealth. The story isn't over. It's just the next chapter in a saga older than nations.